Designing for the holidays. This is likely something that you're going to get asked to do multiple times in your design career, and you may find it difficult to do something fresh and original because people do holiday design every year. It comes around every single year, right? And they've got to somehow make the same old ideas, imagery, and color combinations fresh and new again. So I want to give you some ideas and about how you can look into the history of these holidays to find a way to do something original that'll make your design stand out. Designing for holidays. It's likely sometime in your design career, probably pretty early, people are going to ask you for some holiday design. And I'm going to tell you about holiday design from a Western perspective. I'm assuming that's where you guys are from. Essentially, there are three big holidays in the US. And what you're going to find is that when you do design work for a holiday, you want to go back, and this goes for any kind of design work actually, when you're dealing with something that's cultural, right? When you're dealing with something that is steeped in a history that your parents and your grandparents were part of, there's certain things they're going to expect to see that are going to be cultural triggers for them, right? To recognize holiday design. So with any kind of design, you want to go back and look at the roots, right? You want to go back and look at where did it originate from? What were people designing 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 80 years ago? You know, a lot of traditions are pretty old. So what you're going to probably get asked to do is design for one of the three major holidays, one of the three major Christian holidays. And what you're going to find is that they are not based in what you would expect, right? Which is the info that you're going to find in holy texts like the Bible. What you'll actually find is that if you go and look in the Bible, there's a ton of holidays in there. And almost none of them are celebrated by most Christians today. For instance, like Passover, Feast of Tabernacles, they don't celebrate those things. What they do celebrate are renamed pagan holidays. So if you're designing for these holidays, which are Christmas, Easter, and Halloween, you're going to need to go back and look at pagan traditions in Europe hundreds of years ago. Don't look in the Bible. You're not going to find anything about those holidays in the Bible. Those are not biblical holidays. So to try to explain to you why this is, because maybe you are new to the West, right? Maybe you just moved here and this seems kind of weird. So first of all, welcome. And here's some history on what happened and why this is a thing now. Why would Christians celebrate pagan holidays instead of biblical holidays that are in the Bible? You can read about biblical holidays in the Bible, but Christians don't celebrate those. Here's what happened. So back in Europe was mostly a hodgepodge of a bunch of different pagan religions, but they all celebrated religions based on solar movements, right? So they had four major celebrations. They had the Spring Equinox, they had the Summer Solstice, they had the Fall or Autumn Equinox, and they had the Winter Solstice. So they're doing their thing, they're celebrating all these holidays, and Christianity comes through. And they say, you know, you should convert to Christianity. Here's all these good things we can bring. You know, it's a great religion, you should give it a shot. And the pagans probably said, you know, we're not really sure about that. We like things the way they are. And the Christians said, well, you really should convert because we don't want you going to hell. And you need to stop celebrating all these holidays that are not in the Bible. We have our own holidays, and you can celebrate those. And the pagans likely said, yeah, we're definitely not doing it now. You're telling us we got to switch religions and we don't get to celebrate our holidays? No, thank you. So they probably gave the Christians a hard pass there. So then the Christians came back and said, okay, look, and these are probably Catholics. They said, all right, look, you can keep your holidays, but what if we rename them, right? If we rename them to Christian-friendly things, would you be willing to at least give Christianity a try? And the pagans probably said, all right, well, tell us what that means. Well, what do you mean we got to rename them? And they said, well, let's talk about it, right? What's the most important holiday to you pagans? And the pagans likely replied, well, the winter solstice, obviously, because the winter's tough, right? Like, surviving through the winter isn't something we know for sure is going to happen. People die in winter all the time. We don't have indoor heating, right? So it's important to us to try to find some kind of joy and happiness in the depth of winter. So we get together around the winter solstice and we put up a tree, and we call this Yule. And that's our most important holiday. It's very important to us. And the Christians probably came back and said, okay, you can keep Yule, but let's change it to Jesus's birthday, right? We'll change it to Jesus' birthday, and we'll have a special Mass. We'll call it Christ's Mass. How's that? Okay, but we still get to put up the tree, right? Yeah, keep the tree. The tree's fine, whatever. We don't really do trees in the Bible, but we didn't have evergreens in the Middle East. But you guys do you. Just call it Christ's Mass, and we'll be good. Okay, fine, whatever. All right. Besides the winter solstice, what's the next most important holiday? Well, after the winter solstice, we have the Spring Equinox, right? And that's a time where everything is growing, animals are coming out, and they're reproducing. It's a very important fertility and rebirth time. We're celebrating the rebirth after a harsh winter. So we do that by we do it with rabbits because they reproduce very quickly and rapidly, and we do it with eggs because that symbolizes the rebirth of things being born and coming out. So it's really it's kind of a fertility thing that we do, and we call it Ostara, or in some places Esther. And the Christians said, well, we can't really worship rabbits and eggs, which doesn't really make sense because rabbits don't lay eggs. Whatever, whatever. Rebirth. Okay. Well, we think after Jesus was crucified, he was reborn in a cave and then disappeared. So why don't we just make Esther? What'd you call it? Esther, Ostra, Easter. We'll call it Easter. That's close enough, right? Because he was reborn, he was resurrected. That's basically the same thing. It's about resurrection and rebirth, right? Is that good? Sure, Christians. That's fine. Okay, what else? What's the next one you got? Well, probably the next most important one to us would be the Autumn Equinox, right? Because that's when we get all our food. We grow food all year long. We harvest it at the end of summer in the autumn equinox, and we give thanks to our dead relatives, our ancestors, right? Because that's a time when family really comes together and huddles down for the cold season and winter, and we really look to our ancestors to help us out to make it through. So we thank our dead ancestors and our dead relatives, and it's a time of gathering food and gathering family together around the harvest. Okay, pagans, we don't really worship the dead in Christianity, not as such, right? So how do we get around this worship the dead thing? Okay. So we have something similar where we worship saints, right? Like that's kind of a thing that we do. We'll worship saints. What if we say that the autumn equinox, and what did you guys call that? We call it Samhain. Samhain. Okay. We can't call it that. That's super pagan sounding. We're not going to call it Samhain. what if we call it a day where we worship the saints? We'll call it All Saints Day, or the saints are hallowed. Saints are hallowed. So why don't we call it All Hallowed Day? We'll call it All Hallowed Day, and we'll have a celebration on that day. How's that? We're worshiping the saints who happen to be dead, right? You guys are into worshiping the dead, right? Whatever. Is that cool? Sure, that's fine, but we don't really do it on the day of. We kind of have the celebration the day before because, we have bonfires and stuff and it gets into night. It's a big party. It's a lot of fun. Okay, so you celebrate it on the eve of All Hallowed Saints. Okay, so what if we call it All Hallows Eve? We'll call it All Hallows Eve, and it's the celebration the day before All Saints Day. Is that cool? You can still do all your dead ancestor worship, I guess, and the harvest is fine because you got to eat, I suppose. Is that okay? Yeah, sure. That's fine, Christians. We'll do that. That'll be just fine. All right, pagans. You said you had one more. What's that one about? Yeah, there's one more. It's during the summer solstice, and this is another fertility festival, right? Because we're really into fertility. Yeah, of course you are. We call it Litha, or Midsummer in some parts, and it's a big celebration, and we symbolize fertility. And what we do is we put up what we call a maypole, and we put up this big pole, and the pole represents a male phallus. And we get a bunch of young women to come and dance around the phallus, and they grab ribbons, and they dance around the phallus, and they grab ribbons, which represent, the ribbons represent fertility from the tip of the phallus. And it comes down to the girls, and they're all dancing around. Okay, no. Absolutely not. You can have the other three. We are not going to have girls dancing around a giant penis as a celebration. That's going to be a hard no, pagans. You're going to have to compromise with us on this. We can't do the penis festival, but we will do the other three. Is that cool? To which the pagans probably said, yeah, okay. I guess 3 out of 4 is good enough, right? Secretly, they still do the giant penis festival. If you go and look at a lot of European countries, you'll see them celebrating Midsummer with the maypole. People are super excited about it. You're not likely to get asked to do design for Midsummer here in the U.S. If you're in Europe, you might, Northern Europe especially. But if you're in the U.S., you're going to be doing Christmas. You're going to be doing Easter. You're going to be doing Halloween. And culturally, there's certain colors that go with that. Christmas is a really good example of how they took 2 complementary colors, red and green, that go together. Those 2 colors go together to human eyes all over the world, but in the West, if you see red and green together, people automatically assume it's Christmas related. That's how strong of a cultural connection those colors are. So if you're doing Christmas design, definitely use red and green. For Halloween, you want to focus on black and orange. That's mostly because it's celebrated at night, and usually it involves some kind of fire, either a bonfire or somebody's carved out an orange pumpkin and they've got a fire inside of it. You'll have some secondary colors like tans and browns, and that's mostly from the harvest, wheat and things like that, barley that are being harvested at that time of year. So focus on those colors for Halloween. And if you're doing Easter, which used to be called Ostara, look up the rabbits, look up the eggs. There's a lot of old pagan imagery around that. With Easter, you're going to be mostly doing pastels, light blues, pinks, yellows, that kind of thing. There'll be some bright greens, right? Because there's a lot of grass growing and new plants are coming up. So there's a lot of flowery colors and lots of greens that represent renewal and birth. Yule is spelled Y-U-L-E. Ostara is spelled O-S-T-A-R-A. And Litha, or Midsummer, is L-I-T-H-A, or Midsummer, M-I-D-S-U-M-M-E-R. What you want to focus on here is whenever you do design work for something that has a long history, go back as far as you can to the roots. Go back to the source material and work from there, right? Because that's the original heart of the design. And it's better than trying to just copy what you see around you, because it's not really going to stand out. It's going to look just like everything else. It's going to blend in. And for holidays in particular, go back to the pagan roots. That's what Christians are going to expect to see. That's what non-Christians are going to expect to see. That's what anyone who's grown up in the West is going to expect to see. They're going to see all the pagan imagery, and to them, that's going to represent their holiday. And you should have a lot more success when you go back and look at that information. And there's a lot of detailed history there when you go back and look at all the Europeans and what they did back in the day.